Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm Greg and he's Jens, and this is Wirecast in the
Hello,
Wild. Hello, everyone.
welcome.
Welcome indeed. So, Wirecast in the Wild, for those who may be here for the first time, we sit and we talk about Wirecast. It's a piece of software that both of us use for video production. Jens, where are you based again, just out of interest?
Today I'm in my office in my studio, so that's located in Nuremberg, Germany.
Yeah, and I'm based out of Sydney, Australia. We're two regular Wirecast users, and we wanted to share what we're learning and doing with Wirecast, see if we can be useful to a few other people. And Jens, you picked the topic this week. You wanted to talk about inputs. What is it about inputs that was interesting to you? What made you think of that?
There's such a variety of different inputs available, ranging from webcam, maybe built in if you're using a laptop, up to, I don't know, 4K cameras. And I think it's always worth talking about how to get into your software. What are the pros? What are the cons? Be it with capture card, be it with NDI, whatever. So I thought it's a good topic. We had network stuff last week. NDI is net video over network, so it kind of continues. And then I thought there USB cards, FireWire, hopefully not that much anymore. But yeah, heaps of possibilities, and I think that's a good area to have a chat about.
So let's start with where we kind of were last week, network and NDI. That first question for you, just out of interest, do you think the non-NDI or the non-network sources are dead?
No, not by now. I think SDI has still the use case. HDMI is just nothing for pro use. You can get away with 3-meter runs, but if you have long runs, HDMI is nothing you want to use. So SDI still has the market, I think the majority of the market, but they see the network stuff coming, and with the network you can transmit over WAN. So you can send your SDI signal, convert it to NDI, and send the NDI signal over WAN and receive it somewhere else at the other end of the globe, and then you have the same quality. So if bandwidth permits.
Yeah, so there's an interesting topic. We were talking just before we went on about how do we get video from you to me, and at the moment we're using Rendezvous, and you said to me, let's try using NDI, and I said, what? How can you use NDI because of how much bandwidth it uses? Now, I wasn't aware that you could configure the amount of bandwidth on an NDI output. What would you be using to get NDI to me?
There's a company out called MediaLux. They have NDI transport, or there's another one if you're more into the Mac world. It's the Sienna Cloud. So you can have almost sending 10 sites, sending NDI to the cloud, and then you pick one, and you could connect all the NDI. Depends on the connectivity for sure, but you can receive it. They have some gateways, and then you receive the NDI again wherever you are. So there are heaps of possibilities.
Okay. While we're here, just if anyone has tech questions, and I know that there's kind of a bit of an overlap with people from my drone world. There's a few people there who obviously are from the drone world. But if there are others in the room from the Wirecast world, if you've got questions and you want to throw them at us, please do that. And speaking of that, next week, we're going to do something a bit different. We're going to have a look at questions from the Wirecast forum, see if we can answer them. Who knows, we might answer some questions there next week. So let's continue. So NDI, we'll give that a try next week. If you've got some of that equipment and that rig, we'll definitely give that a try next week. I wasn't aware you could do that, so that should be cool.
Yeah. So today my camera, usually I use SDI and I have a capture card. And today I thought, hey, we were talking about network stuff. So I connected my camera now to an NDI encoder and ingest NDI. And that's what I sent to you into the rendezvous session, the NDI signal.
Okay. So in simple terms, inputs that we've talked about NDI, we've talked about SDI, which is the high-end broadcast kind of quality. We've talked about HDMI. Any thoughts about particularly compatibility with Wirecast? What types of input devices are good to get that in? I mean, personally, I'm using a Black Magic box. What would you comment on that?
Black Magic is, I think, bang for the buck, to put it short. You get a lot of stuff for little dollars. But my experience with Black Magic is that you constantly have driver issues. Sooner or later, you need to update constantly. So this can be a pain point. If you're happy to do so, I think it's absolutely good value. The other vendor I would suggest is take a look at the Magewell side. They have a variety of capture cards, and they're StarTech or even AJA, but that is a little bit higher priced.
Yeah. So. Have you played with Elgato at all?
No, honestly not.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine who's using Elgato as an input, and let me go back to the two shot. There we go. He's doing very, very well with that. And the only problem that he had, and this is an interesting topic, in terms of inputs, using devices across a USB bus as opposed to something that's a PCI card or whatever it might be, I've seen a lot of people having challenges with USB inputs to Wirecast and indeed to any broadcasting software. Just to share very, very briefly this story, and you can add in and chime in and comment. His challenge was that he's got this Elgato device. It's a USB 3 compatible device. It makes a request on the USB bus and says, I want to send USB 3. And for whatever reason on his particular hardware bus, it was detecting USB 2 is the maximum that it could negotiate at with this particular device, which then caused Wirecast to come up and do the famous error, insufficient bandwidth, that a lot of people have talked about over time. So yeah, that's a bit of a challenge. The solution in his case, temporary solution, unplug it and plug it back in again. Kind of like reboot the computer, tech support 101, which got it working, but it didn't give him a reliable solution. Long term, he tried initially replacing the USB card. For whatever reason, he got another USB card that was incompatible. But later on, he then went to a whole new system. He replaced the computer, and it now detects absolutely perfectly first go, every go.
I think the challenge with the computers is you don't know how many USB buses they really have. Wirecast has a nice tool. You can check the bandwidth and it lists all the buses. So usually on a laptop computer, there's more or less just one bus. You can get away on a tower PC, whatever. You can get away with a few USB buses. And you want to have as many as possible, especially talking about USB 3. Because with USB 3, you can get in full HD without any issues. And with USB 2, it's kind of limited bandwidth-wise per specs from the USB connection.
So let's put this another way. Getting inputs into Wirecast, you would start with at the bottom end with a USB input from a converter card of some sort, then moving up from there
Oh, you can even start with a webcam. A usual webcam, I mean, they start at, what do they start at? 30, 40 euros, dollars, whatever. If you buy a little bit better, the full HD one, you get near the C920 is a good example. I think it's around $80, something like that. So that's a good start if you want to start on low budget. And the C920 is compatible. It's a very good webcam, I would say. So you can do quite well with this low budget.
Just out of interest, the camera that I'm using today is a FaceTime camera built into my workstation. So, but either way, the webcams are generally connected via USB. So in terms of bus and connectivity and all of that kind of stuff, starting at USB, then going up Thunderbolt, which is what I use for my normal broadcast when I'm using a DSLR. Yep. Going up from that, some kind of internal card that's using your computer's normal internal bus if you're not using a Mac, obviously. So those are your, orders of magnitude in terms of quality, starting at the bottom and working up.
Yeah, I think Thunderbolt is more specific to Macs, not saying that you can't get Thunderbolt on Windows, but it's more specific to Macs. So there's the USB 3 option on Windows, and you can get very good capture cards. I have an example. It's usually green, so it's now keyed as well. But this is the AVIO from Epiphan. So that works pretty good. You can connect everything from computer source to camera. It does not do SDI. It does do HDMI. So you just have a 1 meter cable, plug it in, and then the USB 3 length is limited as well. So you have to be very close to the computer where you ingest with your camera.
Yeah. Let me go back just for 1 second to the topic of NDI versus the others. What's the reason that you think NDI is not going to overtake SDI for broadcast in terms of particularly things over longer distances? Do you think SDI is going to stick around for a while?
Yes, I think so. I mean, everybody, once the internet came up, everybody said who's reading newspapers, and same happened with ebooks. Who's reading books? So I think everything has a place, and SDI is good if you have a fixed setup. You don't need encoders if you have capture cards, whatever. It's just wiring straight. You don't have to worry. It just works. If you start a new studio, you may think, hey, why should I buy extra cable for SDI? I have a network connected. You may want to start with NDI and invest in encoders instead of cables.
So let me rephrase it. If you're building a new setup, you're going to use NDI. There's no reason to use SDI. You're going to get the same kind of quality, or is there enough loss to be a concern?
You get the same kind of quality. The latency is very low, and you have to consider a few things. Stepping back to the network part, there are two NDI signals available: the NDI HX, which is, I wouldn't say low quality. It's compressed. And that's around 5 megabits per second. You can send it over Wi-Fi connections, and the classic encoder for this would be the Nutic Spark. And then
how much does that go for?
You mean distance-wise?
No, price.
This is I don't know, $4.99. Honestly, I don't know. But I think check the NewTek website. You find these blue antennas, and I think it's $499. So I mean, if you compare a capture card, it's maybe $1,000. This is half the price. So a 4-channel capture card will give you 4 inputs. With this one, you just have 1 input. So buying 4 of these, you're more expensive than a capture card. So it really depends on your setup, on where do you want to go. Are you on a mobile setup? Are you in a studio? It's money. It's what budget do you have? So it very depends. And then just continuing on the NDI side, there's another one, the full bandwidth NDI signal. That's around 100 megabits per second. And considering your NIC has just a gigabit connection, so you limit it to, I think 4 or 5 cameras are fine. But if you add on bandwidth, and you will reach a point where your NIC is just full of bandwidth. It's exaggerated, and you get network congestions. So it doesn't work in a 10 camera setup. At least not with a normal NIC. If you go the 10 gig or 40 gig card, then yes, you can add more cameras then.
Okay. But just to share out of interest, right? So I'm using NDI from my laptop to this machine, and I use that for getting title information in. But what confused me is I didn't think I was
up for me.
Welcome to the internet. What I wasn't aware of was that NDI could do lower speeds. Getting the titles in, it was always required.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Okay. Are we going to finish early today? So, look, let me just keep talking just for a couple of moments, and I'll type to him and let him know. So I just typed to you. So in terms of NDI, I wasn't aware that, for example, NDI would allow lower bandwidth. So whenever I was putting titles up on my computer, I was using them from...
Rick, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I typed to him and he didn't see the message.
Now I hear you again.
You can hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, everything good now.
I was just saying I was typing to you in Skype. Go and read your Skype. But anyway, it's all good. What I was saying is I wasn't aware of the capabilities of NDI to drop the speed down, right? So from Wirecast doing an output NDI, you don't have any parameters that you can set the bandwidth or the capability out from Wirecast. So it's using as much as it can get. From Titler Live, same kind of thing. I'm using my Titler computer, getting video into Wirecast, and it didn't have any setting either. And the interesting thing for me is I'm doing this over a Ethernet cable. It works fine. If I actually try that over Wi-Fi, it doesn't work well. So I was surprised. That's the reason I was surprised when you're saying, "Hey, let's do NDI from the other side of the world." And yeah, we'll definitely have to play with that.
Yeah, so look at the Spark one. This is designed to be on mobile because it has 2 antennas. These connect to your Wi-Fi network. So this is NDI HX. This is reduced bandwidth and compressed. The other one, you can use another famous brand, the Bird Dog stuff. You can use these ones. And these are full bandwidth NDI signals. And that's the reason why you experience over Wi-Fi, all the SDK stuff is full bandwidth. You need FPGAs for the NDI HX. And that's why it's more or less limited to hardware encoders. So you don't get the HX into software. It's just hardware exclusive. And that's the reason why from Tidler and the output from Wirecast is full bandwidth. And if you receive and send 100 megabits, it's 200 megabits on your Wi-Fi. And then that's the reason why I think your Wi-Fi is just full of bandwidth. And then that's the reason why it blocks or stops.
Yeah, my Wi-Fi has more bandwidth, but it's never perfect. There's always going to be RF noise and interference that will annoy it. But anyway. Okay, let's talk about any other types of inputs. So you're the one who set the topic. What are the other inputs that you want to chat about today?
Classic is the capture card. So you have any sort of capture card ranging roughly from 1 to 8 inputs. 1 to 4 is maybe the standard. You can use the PCI Express bus. So this is something for tower PCs. It's hard to get these capture cards into laptops. There are some maybe on mini PCI Express that you could, but then you have to drill holes into the housing or whatever to get the connectors out. So I think on a mobile setup, you're bound to Thunderbolt or even USB. And with the Thunderbolt, you can have some GPU extender chassis where you mount then your capture card inside. So that's one option if you on a mobile setup use Thunderbolt to GPU extender box, and then you can use a capture card inside these enclosures, and then you have a capture card connected to a laptop, for example.
I'll tell you what, I might suggest that we cut the show short today, and I'll tell you why. I'm looking at some stats on my screen, and I'm seeing the number of drop frames on this is pretty high, and from time to time I see CPU spiking on this machine. But here's the interesting thing. The settings on this broadcast today, I deliberately changed it down to 25 frames per second to try and improve in terms of bandwidth. And of course, the local display is set to 25 frames per second as well in the Wirecast preferences. But for whatever reason, and I'm looking at this trying to work out why, and I have no idea why the system CPU would be going up that high. And it is all Wirecast, so I don't want people to be watching something. And in fact, if you could comment in the chat, is the broadcast coming through okay, or are we having challenges? But anyway,
the YouTube monitor I have running on a separate computer just shows good. It looks fine.
Okay. I'm just seeing so far we've had 1,764 dropped frames according to Wirecast. So not the best kind of numbers.
That might be the spot where I lost you audio-wise.
It's now 1,834. It's going up, and 63% system CPU. Yeah. So we won't keep it too long, but look, what I do want to do next week is have a chat about the questions that people are asking in the Wirecast forum. Let's answer some of those questions ourselves, provide some input, provide some feedback. Hopefully we can also, and you know what I might do, just before I do anything, I'm going to go over to my Tidler computer over here and turn off a few things and see if that input to Wirecast is going to help. It shouldn't greatly, but anyway. Any last thoughts before we go?
I would say it depends on the setup, the capture card you use. If you're going network wise, you can add audio as well. So it might be the easier way to cable, because you have network available generally. Make sure, just a hint, that IGMP snooping is enabled on all the devices, otherwise the multicast won't work for NDI.
Yeah. I just did a quick little experiment while we were live here, and I fixed it. You're never going to guess what it was. Come on, guess.
The titler? The
Nope.
titler?
Nope. I closed the rendezvous dashboard.
You're kidding.
No. So the CPU load went from 75%, which is what it was running before, down to 35 to 40%, which is what it's running now.
I wouldn't expect that much utilization from just the dashboard.
So there's our tip of the day. If you're doing rendezvous, don't leave the dashboard open once you've got your people into the shots. And Wirecast, we'd love you to have a look at that so that you can. I'm guessing that you're not using the GPU for the rendering in the rendezvous window. That's ultimately what's probably causing it. Speaking of which, let me ask you a question going back to our previous topic, since we've got the problem resolved. Theoretically, is it possible for someone who's using NDI in software, like Wirecast, to go and send encoding for NDI outputs up to a GPU so that they can actually output at a lower bandwidth? That should be possible, yeah?
What I've used in the past is with the MediaLux software, you can just send, it ingests NDI signal, and you can send over a WAN connection. That's what we can try after the show. And you can set the bandwidth for the transmissions. It starts as low, I think, as 2.5 meg, and it goes up to 50, 60 megabits per second. And on the receiving side, you have a sender and a receiver part of the software. Let's put it this way. And I've tried it from Russia, and I had around 150 milliseconds latency. So it was almost as good as you could control the remote computer with mouse and keyboard, and don't wait for your input a minute, something like this. I tried it from different locations in Germany. So this you can use if you do or think about remote production. So you have, I don't know, a friend somewhere around the world. You do, like we do, weekly, monthly shows. If you're in the enterprise business, you have different locations, you want a video conference, whatever. You can easily combine and bridge or send the NDI over a WAN connection to a remote location, and that's pretty awesome.
Speaking of sending video to remote locations, something that I want to do in the near future with a colleague of mine. He's also got Wirecast. This is Kelly from Ready Set Drone, for those of my drone audience who know him. We've got a clash where, because of time zone changes, his monthly show happens the same time as one of my weekly shows. So we said, okay, no problem. Let's go and merge the two together. So I've got to try and come up with a solution to have my raw camera chroma keyed as an input to him, and to have his raw camera chroma keyed or not as an input to mine, which I can put into my usual kind of virtual studio look that I do. So I was initially going to try and do that with Rendezvous, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We're going to experiment and play around a bit.
Let's test with the MediaLux software. I'm sure we can solve this problem.
Yeah. Okay. Look, we'll leave it there for today. We did have a little bit of discussion about inputs, and there's so much more that you can do. I mean, within the Wirecast UI, if I go and click now, video capture, we've spoken about some of that stuff. Audio capture, one of the tricks that, and I forgot to do it today, I think, I'll check later, but to try and align your voice and your picture a little bit more is to do a clap test in front of a camera, get Wirecast recording, clap, go and work out what the delay is, and you can change that in Wirecast. Obviously, the media files, go ahead.
So sorry to interrupt you. This, if you bored of clap tests like this, you can use a nice video. You find it on the Epiphan channel. They have visual and audio clicking. And if you film your screen and the speaker with your camera, you don't need to clap, and you can even measure how many milliseconds or frames you have to delay audio or video. So I can post a link after the show. And this is a video I use. It's publicly available, and it saves you some stupid clap tests.
Yeah, I would love it if there was a way to auto-process the video that you record with a camera and your microphone input and have it automatically tell you the number. That'd be a cool piece of software. I'd love it if Wirecast had that. That'd be cool. Anyway, I'm just dreaming. But other types of input. So we've talked about video capture, audio capture, media files. We had a quick look at the stock media library and chatting about that. Just before we go, speaking about that, an idea that I gave to the Wirecast team recently is around licensing. So instead of waiting for YouTube to copyright claim you, just imagine if the Wirecast API could go and connect to your video and digitally sign your broadcast after it finishes and say, here's the license and a one-time key that proves that this guy is licensed for the following content. Now, if you've used the media library, you've got this list of download stuff, so it can include the names of all of that at the end. So it should be very much doable. Network, we've spoken about, NDI inputs, Rendezvous, we're using it now. Web page inputs are pretty cool, but they've got some limitations. You can't interact with it, so you can't do anything there. The web stream, have you played much with web stream inputs, Jens?
All my cameras have, so the camera now I use now is a box camera. It has SDI, HDMI, and network output. So you can use almost...
Are you trying to brag there? You've got, what camera was it?
It's a Chinese vendor. It took me ages to find something on the internet because I always looked at a camera that is affordable, that has SDI and HDMI output, and is PoE powered. So I run just one cable to the camera, if I wish, which is the network cable, and I can do everything with the camera. It has a user interface, and you can zoom in, out, you can focus. So there's a 30x optical zoom. So that's pretty decent camera for a nice budget.
Okay. Let's continue the exploration through the Wirecast UI. So we've talked network and web streaming as an input. Just to let people know, there's two types of connections. There's push versus pull RTMP. Wirecast only supports pull, so you cannot push to Wirecast. If you want to do that, you'd need some third-party software. Screen capturing, that's pretty straight ahead. The remote desktop presenter, try not to use that. People are saying in the current version that it's not working at all. So if you want to do screen capture on a remote PC, perhaps using NDI scan converter, which is freely available software. We've had a look at the QR code generator previously. That's pretty cool. The image carousel, I never use that. That's just me. The clock, I don't use that. I use my own JavaScript to do stuff. Scoreboarding, yeah, it's it's there. Some of the Twitter feed stuff, I haven't played around with that, but I use Title Alive. Speaking of which, Title Alive inputs as an overlay within Wirecast. I would personally suggest not using that directly on the same computer. The CPU overhead from Title Alive combined with Wirecast itself just makes it impossible to actually do anything with that. And virtual sets. I'm not using that today, but I do use that normally. I'm hoping for some improvements in the virtual set capability in future versions of Wirecast. But anyway.
Honestly, these virtual sets look so 1980. They haven't changed much since version 3 or 4. So that's they could do a redesign, I would say. So it looks a little bit more 21st century and not in the 80s.
Yeah, the virtual set that I'm using in my regular show is absolute rubbish. Having said that, I do have another one, and I want to use it, but I can't use it. And the reason that I can't use it is you can't rotate some of the objects in the Z-axis, number one, first of all, in terms of pre-configured objects in virtual sets. It's a limitation in Wirecast. It's on their list of things that we want fixed. The other problem is that to actually calculate the object rotation within Wirecast is really, really complex to get it so that your TV image of your guest actually lines up with the TV frame that you've got over there. That's really, really complex maths to do that. And unfortunately, Wirecast don't do it for us. There is a way that they can do that, and I can't remember the name of the, what's it called? Not projective transformation, some other buzzword that in a future version, if Wirecast support that, that'll overcome that problem. But anyway, we did look at inputs after all that, and we didn't have any more drop frames as far as I can see after turning off the Rendezvous dashboard and after the CPU load went down. So big tip, turn off Rendezvous dashboard in future. Anyway, thanks, Jens. It was fun talking to you.
Yep, thank you.
And
pleasure, as always.
We'll come back next week and we'll troll through the Wirecast forums and have a look for the common questions and discussion threads that are in there and hopefully answer some questions. So that's all for now. See you next time. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.